Hi everyone, so today I'm going to show you how I deal with difficult exposures using a lot of the tools that are available to us in the camera and then also using an on-camera flash. Now a lot of the settings I'll be using today should be pretty close to what you have on your Olympus camera. I'll be using the Olympus Pen F today with the 14-42 kit lens together with my Godox TT350. And the settings in here are going to be almost identical to the EM5 Mark II, the EM10 Mark II, and not too dissimilar, say, from the EM5 Mark III and the EM1 Mark II. So first let's look at this scene behind me. I have some very strong light coming in through the window, and then I have some dark shadows back here with the brown cabinets, and then I have the main dining room area here with the table and the flowers. And what I'll do is I'm going to take a couple of pictures. First one I'm just going to shoot in program mode without the flash just to see what the camera would do on its own. And then I'm going to turn the flash on into TTL mode and then see what the camera does when it can use flash. And then I'm also going to try just a standard HDR shot, which is supposed to help with scenes like this. And then finally I'll show you all of the settings that I would use to take this same picture. Alright, the first thing we're going to do here is just do a full factory reset, like so that we can all be on the same page. And I have the camera in program mode, so let me pick a focus point right here on the flowers, and we'll take a picture. And the flash is off. And if we look at that picture, as you can see, the window is almost completely blown out, and the shadows are very, very dark. So this is not a very pleasing picture or anything like what I can see with my naked eye. So what I'd probably do here is just dial in some exposure compensation. So let me dial in a +1 exposure comp, and that looks pretty good. Now we have, a fairly decent exposure, I think. Not bad, but we can do better. Let's see what happens when we turn the flash on. And I'm going to dial exposure compensation back to 0. And again, with the flash in TTL mode, the camera is going to control the flash power output and combine that with the exposure settings it's going to use in the camera to kind of give you the final image. Now that picture is a little closer to what I can see with my naked eye. However, in the window back here, when I look with my naked eye, I can see a couple of houses, a few cars driving by. At the same time, I'm able to look in here and see everything, at a normal exposure to my naked eye. Everything looks fine, but the camera is just not able to pick up all of that dynamic range. Alright, so now let's just take a picture in HDR mode. And if you notice the lighting changed a little bit, that's because it has. I forgot to do the HDR shot when I was filming earlier. But anyhow, let's just do a quick picture in program mode to do a comparison with the lighting as it is now. And then we'll use the in-camera HDR mode. So we're going to turn that to HDR1, like so. And HDR1 is basically going to take 4 pictures at different exposures and then blend them together to try to balance the overall exposure of the scene. And let's see how that looks. And as you can see, the window is a little better. You can kind of see the roof line now, but the bright area is still blown out quite a bit. It's still better than the program mode picture we got, but we can do better. So how do we set the camera to kind of bring in more of what's outside, but still keep the inside illuminated? And this is where we have a lot of tools available to us in our camera to help us with that. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is go into spot metering. So we can do that in the Super Control panel, and it's right here that's highlighted. I'm just going to change that to spot metering like so. And then another feature we can use is our highlight and shadow warnings. So that's in the main menu. So we go into the menu. So we'll go down to the cog here, go into display, and then scroll all the way down to info settings right here. And we'll click over to the right, go into live view info, click over to the right, and then we're going to click on custom settings and click over to the right. And I'm going to turn on highlight and shadow. and turn off the histogram. And that's all we need to do there. Now there's another setting I like to change, and that's the highlight shadow settings. And that will have the highlight shadow warnings come in a little bit sooner. So we'll do that. We'll just go down here to histogram settings. And I'm going to change these all the way to their minimums here at 245. And then raise the shadows up to 10. And that's the maximum there. So now, when I get my highlight and shadow warnings, it's basically a blue area, red area blinking. Some people call it the blinkies, right? They'll come in a little bit sooner. It'll give me a little sooner warning. Now there's another thing we need to change in the display menu, and that is the live view boost. And the default settings are for live view boost to be on in manual and in bulb. And I'm going to be shooting in manual mode here in a minute, so let's turn this off because I want to be able to see the exposure in the live view. Because if I left live view boost on, it's not going to show me the exposure properly on the back of the live view. Now there's one more setting I'm going to change on the Pen F, and this is not available say on the EM10 Mark II, but it's not a big deal. You can still work with the camera and do everything I'm doing just the same. But in the Pen F and the EM5 Mark II, the EM5 Mark III, etc., any higher model, you can go into the exposure menu and then scroll all the way down until you see spot metering. And right now you can see nothing is checked. We're going to turn that on. And what that does is it ties the focus point and spot metering together. So anywhere you focus, that's where it's going to spot meter. On say the EM10 Mark II and models below that, your spot meter is always going to be in the center of the screen, dead center. But with higher cameras, Pen F and EM5 Mark II, Mark III, etc., you are able to link the spot meter and the focus point together, and that's what that setting does. So all I have to do now is point over here, and you can see that the camera is now metering for the window. And if I want to meter for the flowers, I can just go over here or move my focus point. Now if you have the EM10 Mark II, what you would have to do is just, you would just move the camera around the center, like so, and you'll be able to do the same thing. But it's a lot easier with when you can link the focus point together. All right, so let me go into manual mode. And we're going to use the highlight and shadow warnings together with the EV meter to try to adjust this exposure to what we want. And I'll share with you kind of my thought process on how I get to the exposure that I want to get to. So now that we're in manual mode, I can just kind of jump around here, but something's not right. Okay, we're not seeing actually the actual exposure based on the settings here in manual mode. We have our shutter speed at 1/250th of a second, our aperture at f5.6, and then you can see our EV meter is blinking -3. And anytime this EV meter is blinking, it's telling me that the camera is not showing me the final exposure. So we need to adjust the settings, either shutter speed or aperture, to get the EV meter to stop blinking. And right there at about 1/60th of a second is right about where it stops blinking. And if I keep going, you can see that the image brightens up. And now we're at 0 EV, meaning we are now properly exposed on the flowers because that's where my focus point is. But that's not actually what I want to expose for. I actually want to expose for the windows. Because if I were to take a picture here, you know, the windows will still be blown out, and that's the kind of picture we've seen up to this point. So I'm going to move the focus point over to the window, and now you can see that the EV meter is blinking +3, meaning what we're seeing in the window is more than 3 stops overexposed based on the settings that we have. So what do? We can speed up the shutter. And I'm just going to rotate this. So right around 1/60 of a second, the EV meter stops blinking. But you can still see there's a lot of red here in the highlights. So let me try and get that down to just to where they're almost all gone. Maybe right about there. There's still a tiny bit there, but that's okay. And when I take an image of a scene like this where there's a window coming in or bright light, I really like to have the window 2 or 3 stops brighter than the rest of the scene, because that's really more natural to our eye. The window is always a little bit brighter than the rest of the scene. So I think at plus 2.3 we're pretty good, and then based on the highlight shadow indicator, there's only a tiny bit of red in there, and that's okay. Now the problem we have is we have a lot of things in the shadow, because if we take a picture here, let me turn off the flash. You can see that this image is, you know, the windows are exposed about like what I want to have them at, but the rest of the scene is too dark. And if I turn the flash on and take a picture, look what happens. Not much, right? Actually almost nothing. And that's because the camera is still metering for the window and then calculating the flash power based on the metering for the windows. So it didn't need much flash because the window's already pretty much exposed or overexposed. So what we need to do is change our flash or our focus point over here to the flowers, like so. And you can see our EV meter is blinking again, and then we have a bunch of highlights red out here in the highlight shadow warnings, but that's okay. That doesn't matter, because now the flash is going to meter for the flowers and not for the window when it controls the flash. But we haven't changed our shutter and aperture or ISO. So let's go ahead and push the shutter button and you'll see. And now if we look, you can see that the exposure in the window has not changed, but the camera has compensated using the flash for the rest of the scene. All right, and that's pretty much it for this lesson. So if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below. And if you'd like to leave a suggestion in my suggestion box, I have one over on my website in the forum, so check that out if you get a chance. Otherwise, hopefully we'll see you again soon.